So we're going to talk today about focusing on our kids' strengths, which is something that can be really challenging when you have a child with neurodiversity, because so much of how our neurotypical society is set up is we see the differences that our kids have as weaknesses that should be corrected, right? So I think it's important to talk about how to kind of push past that stigma and focus on their strengths and use that as a way to kind of find joy in parenting them. So I'm coming from the perspective of parenting kids with FASD, which is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It's the most common form of developmental disabilities affecting 5% of the population. It's caused by prenatal alcohol exposure in kids, which is, even in small amounts, we kind of picture it as being the disability of children of alcoholics, which is not at all what it is. And so as we're parenting these kids that have differences like executive functioning, impulsivity, distractibility, poor judgment skills, all of that stuff, it's really easy to rack up a list of these are all the things that make my life harder in parenting them, right? But there's a lot of beauty in parenting them as well. And I want to talk to you about how you were focusing on your own child's strength. I think that was part of your journey. So you have a son with autism, and also you have a million credentials. You're a social worker, a nurse, and have a legal degree. Is that right?
Yes. I do, and they were helpful in parenting, but at the end of the day, believing in my child and not allowing the world to place an identity on my child was the bigger thing that really helped push things along. I come from a purpose-driven parenting perspective, which that means is that every child has a purpose. They have things that they do well and not so well, and that's every child, whether they have a disability or not. And as parents, our job is to try to hone in on what those strengths are, and then to identify your child's learning style and the best way to make an impression on them so they can thrive, so that they can blossom in the areas that they do have strengths in. So that's the perspective that I approach it from.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, because I think a lot of times, not only us, but also our kids can think of their disability as being completely defining of who they are, and that they don't have strengths themselves, which of course they do. Every person does, right? But I think a lot of times when you see neurodiversity, our kids approach the world from such a different perspective that they really bring a unique perspective to a lot of things they're looking at. Like, I have one that's really good at art and one that's really good at music. And when I say really good at music, they taught themselves how to play the piano without any lessons, kind of good at playing music. So those are things that we capitalize on and say, this is your gifting. This is the thing that you're so amazing at, to focus on that awesomeness. And we talk a lot about how the neurodiversity that makes their brain work a little bit differently can be really positive as well. I read a section of your book for my caregiver tip this week, and one of the things it talked about was learning styles, which we're homeschooling now. So it was as I'm reading it, I'm we should do this. Yes. Music, for example, using music in class more often. And so I was wondering if you could talk through that and maybe what experiences you had with parenting your son and how you found that to be helpful.
Yes, identifying learning styles is extremely important, because you can just kind of haphazardly use tools that are, pretty standard and, really miss the mark, because if it's really not going to tap into how your child learns, then, it's just a waste of time. It's very ineffective. So I'll take myself, for instance. My son is very visual. He has an awesome memory, and he's tactile. Those were the three things that I really had to focus on. I had to actually show pictures a lot. I had to actually demonstrate, do hands-on activities to make general concepts stick. He liked music, so we were able to sing a lot. So I would make a song up about an activity or something that I wanted him to learn. And if he could learn it in a song, then he could remember the steps better, as opposed to just telling him the steps. So that's why learning how your child can best receive information, what does not work, and then eliminate the things that don't work and focus on activities that help them process it. It really makes it go a lot smoother, and you make a lot more progress, and it's less frustrating for your child.
Right, because we're not sitting here and trying to shove information. So like I am a visual learner also. I'm terrible at names unless we have name tags. Like I just can't, you can't tell me your name and I'm gonna remember it. It's really hard for me on social media because most people don't have their actual name as their thing. So I haven't seen it. I'm like, I don't even know what my friend's name is. And so if I were going somewhere and somebody was like, I told you that person's name once, how can you not remember it? Then, like I'd be like, I'm sorry, that's just not something that I'm good at. But our kids don't usually do that. They know that they're not good at it. They feel shame, or they just like are confused why you're even expecting that. And so we get more pushback, more opposition and anger, instead of them being like, well, Mom, that's really not how my brain works. And so I hate that you're expecting that. So those kinds of things, if we can take a step back and see the brain base portion of it, and reformat what we're teaching them in a way that works for them. I know another thing that you said was that we as parents have our own strengths as well. So what does that look like from your perspective?
What that looks like is that understanding that I can't teach my child everything, and it's okay. It really is okay to allow my husband to teach my child certain things. I can teach him. His sister can actually talk to him or show him things differently than I can. They are very much an integral part of the learning process. And I think sometimes we can get hung up on, as parents, into thinking that we have to be the be all and the end all, but that truly is not the case. We have to allow other people to step in and do what works well for your child.
Yes, there is. I really enjoy teaching, but I'm not a great cheerleader. It's not one of my, I know I should be. I teach people to do that, but my husband, that's his thing. So today we were just doing something and he's like, oh my gosh, you did such a good job finishing your water. And I'm like, never would have crossed my mind to say something like that, right? But that's what he's amazing at. So if we have anything that the kids need a little pep up, I don't bring the pep talks. It's not something I'm good at. So he's really good at that. And then my mom was a teacher, so she's always giving me different ideas on how to come at things creatively. We have to use a lot of multisensory approaches also.
Right.
Also, you were talking about modeling where you're like showing something. We do that. We have found that like watching movies about something while explaining that the movie is not real has been helpful because we can refer back to it. And that's one of the reasons we also like traveling, is because we're going somewhere, we're seeing something different, and it's like more, we actually just ate at a Russian restaurant.
Right.
And so we got to talk about where Russia was. Was it hot or cold? Why was the tea hot? Maybe the tea's hot because it's so cold there. And so different things like that make it more of an experience. And that's stuff you don't have to go to Chicago to do that. That's stuff you can do at home. But like, that's what we find works well for us. And my kids are easy travelers also, lucky like that. So that's super awesome. So, what kind of inspired you so you have a book, and I was embracing your child's unique abilities, right?
Right.
I said unique strengths at the beginning. I was like, that's not right. But I was, it's still getting in the groove. So that's on Amazon, available on Amazon. And it's a really quick read and a good, pep talk for yourself on this whole challenging situation. And I'm very proud because you mentioned FASDs in the beginning, which gets left off of a lot of lists. But so what kind of inspired you to write that book, and what are you hoping families gain by reading it?
Yes, it is a short read, and I intentionally made it a short read because
we don't have time.
Parents who are dealing with that, you just don't have a whole lot of time. But what inspired me is that back when I was raising my child, my son is actually 29, and there wasn't a whole lot of support. And even with the support that's out there now, it's still, sometimes it just doesn't seem like enough because, we really are going through so many different things. And part of the book talks about the grief process, what parents have to go through to try to come to a level of acceptance so that they can position themselves to help their children. So I wanted to offer that. I wanted to offer some personal stories and experiences and some tips and also resources to try to help families push through to help their children thrive. Yeah,
that's awesome. I think it's yes, I like the shortness. That's why I say that, because people will be like, I can't read a book. But it's short and it's practical information. So it's not like a ton of fluff, which I think is helpful. You know, like you could fill 300 pages if you wanted, but you're like, we're going to get down to business and talk about what we need to talk about, which is awesome. So yeah, I think that a lot of times, regardless of the diagnosis, the resourcing always feels sparse, right? Of course, with FASD, we're still working on any level of visibility, but it's good to have ideas on. I think resources is one of the main things that I help people with, not necessarily like putting them in touch with that, but like ideas on things that I have used that could work for them as well to help support their family, because this is not a road you can travel alone and have a good mental health situation, right? It's tough. So we gotta reach out of our very closest circle and figure out what other things can be present. So I love that. But so often when we're talking about this, the main thing is that our own mindset shifts, right? Which is the whole thing that you're kind of focused on, is that we're looking at our kids and what they bring to the table, what we bring to the table, recognize what we don't bring to the table, and focus on that. So I love that. I'm hoping that people will take not very long to read your book and kind of get inspired again. It's almost like I was talking about training this week as one of the main ways that I help support my family, and a book is training, right? Like you're relearning what you were supposed to know at the beginning, but sometimes it's hard to remember in the moment. So I'm hoping people will check that out and also follow you, because you post really good tips. You do like IGTVs a lot to talk about that. So I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing.
Thank you. And I also hope that people will embrace their child's unique abilities, think outside the box, and never let anyone define your child. Always know that they have strengths just like everybody else.
Yes, that is, I think a lot of times we hesitate with putting labels on things, right? Because we feel like a label is an end all be all, but a label helps us advocate for services realistically. But a label just kind of gets us in the right arena. Like our kid is our kid, right? And they are an individual that has awesomeness all on their own. So if you are parenting a kid right now and you're like, there's no awesomeness here, you're probably not.
The truth.
You need to take a step back. You probably aren't doing great self-care. Feel free to message me. We can chat through it. But our kids definitely have amazing strengths, and being able to see that makes me a lot more caring mom, because that's not like my first instinct is not just so much compassion, because I'm a very direct person. But when I think about their awesomeness, and when I tell them their awesomeness, it lights them up too. Like they're like, I know, I'm like, that's my thing. I'm really good at, right? So we want more of that for our kids.
Right. Well, thank you so much
for joining. Yeah.
Thank you.
We will keep in touch, and I'm sure we'll collaborate again. Yes, it is like perfect weather. You should be so jealous.
All right.
All right, Michelle. Bye.
Take care. Bye.